Just wait one more minute and then we'll get started. And I think we'll get started, Susan, just to honour the people that have arrived well on time, which is great.
Well, my computer's saying 11:59, so
Wonderful.
we can start the intro.
Well, welcome everybody today. We would like to begin our webinar by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. Very happy to see where you're all coming to us from. Susan and I, who you'll see here joining me on the video as well, are coming to you from Darug Nation. So we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that to anyone present today as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You will notice that your microphone will be muted and your cameras will be off during the presentation today, but we do have the Q&A function. Please feel free to use it. We would love to hear from you what you'd like to know as we go through the content today. And we do have a spot at the end to go through any of those questions as well. You will receive a copy of these slides. Technology, let me just turn that off. You will receive a copy of these slides today and also the recording after today, so that should be helpful to refer back to. And we do like to just also offer a disclaimer. We've done our best today, of course, to make sure that this information is relevant to the current legislation, but implementing it into every single business always has its nuances. So please know that we've done what we could to offer suggestions and scenarios around what we think could apply in some scenarios. And feel free to question us. We're happy to answer those today. But if you'd like more information specific to your workplace and your business, please feel free to have a chat with us after the webinar today. We'd be happy to help you. So the two of us are here today from the Aster team. I am Angela Gauci. I'm the principal consultant here in the team at Aster. And I also have with me Susan. Would you like to introduce yourself, Susan?
Yeah, hi, I'm Susan Rochester, a senior consultant and coach. You may have heard our voices together on the Work Wonders podcast in the past.
True.
So what we're talking about today is obviously the right to disconnect, but it's part of a larger raft of changes in industrial relations that is called the Closing Loopholes Bill. So that covers off on labour hire workers. There's been changes to redundancy and small business classifications related to redundancy, criminalising underpayment of wages, and I'm sure you've seen news items about that in the past, and there'll be many more. There's been changes to the definitions of a casual employee, and we, or at least Angela, did a previous webinar on that, which you can find on our website. There's also changes to how casual conversion works, and of course today's topic, right to disconnect. We've put a QR code on this slide so that you can download the PDF from Fair Work of the timetable for all those changes. It's quite complex. Our job is to keep you up to date with them as they come through, but you know, it's worth having a look to just put this all in context. Thanks, Angela. Angela's in charge of the slides, so if there's a slight delay, it's because we're thinking. So our agenda for today, as Angela has described some of it, we're talking about what is the right to disconnect and giving you the, I guess, the legal definition of that. We're going to be looking at the employer responsibilities and the employee responsibilities, and looking at implementation challenges and solutions. And there'll be time for a live Q&A at the end, as Angela said. And as we go through all these topics, we're also going to be giving you some scenarios to, I guess, you know, check all of our understanding in terms of what right to disconnect means.
Very true, Susan. Well, if I dare say the dreaded word COVID, if I take us back a few steps, where we all had the imposed lockdowns on us, for the most part, all industries are different, I know, but for the most part, we got very used to working from home, like this guy here. Um, and there's a lot of benefits for that. It made it so easy for us to connect and keep going when we had to. It's offered a lot of flexibility and different options for people, which I'm sure staff are enjoying. And you can wear your pajama pants if you choose to, like this guy. Um, but bringing work into the home and the workplace being at home, not just in the traditional office or warehouse or whatever you may manage, um, has its intricacies and the need for boundary, of course. And some of us might be well familiar with that now and doing it quite well. But pardon me, as we start to talk about the right to disconnect, these sorts of thoughts come up. It's really important to think about. Other than that, flexibility, that's not necessarily a new thing, but working flexibly also has brought about changes to the way that a team might work. So it might be something you've done for a while, but the others, it might be new. But you might have some staff that are working different patterns to hours. You might have some that get up early and finish by 1 p.m, or you might have others that do school hours and then tack a few more hours on after the kids go to bed at night. And what's happening there is not everybody in the team is online at the exact same time. And so it's the need to be really clear around the expectation of when you need to be online and so on. Talking about online, technology is a great thing. It's allowed us a chance to have this webinar today, to communicate. There's some really great apps out there to engage and motivate teams to, project plan together, to communicate together, all sorts of things. And they're wonderful. But it's also important to think about those notifications that people are getting, and especially if you've got people that are working from home, that those sort of notifications and things might then start to drift into a personal device or something that's in, the room next door. So, the traditional workplace we might all be used to, it might have been a drive away or it might still be, but every now and then you might work from home. And so work's just in the next room, or in some cases in your hand if you're using a mobile device. So I just put that in your mind as we start to talk about this topic today. To you, Susan.
Yes, thank you. I was just thinking also I wanted to point out that if questions arise while we're going through this, please feel free to add them to the Q&A with the little question mark symbol is down the bottom. Please feel free to put questions in there so that you don't forget them and we can address them at the end. So what are we talking about when we're talking about, then what are we talking about? The right to disconnect. So the definition that we've been given is that the employees will have the right to refuse contact or attempted contact outside their working hours unless that refusal is unreasonable. And we'll be talking a lot about what that means. But in terms of the day-to-day, it means that an employee can refuse to monitor, read, or respond to any form of contact from an employer or a third party. So employer is pretty clear, but who do we mean when we're talking about a third party? So third party could be your co-workers, or they could be anyone your organisation works with, such as subcontractors, suppliers, customers and clients. So contact from any of those is considered as part of this right to disconnect legislation. As Angela was mentioning, there's so many ways that people can get notifications these days, and there's a few that you might not think of that really relate to, where we mention someone or tag someone in a post or in a conversation. It might be within your CRM, it might be within your project management tool. So these are all connections or attempts at contact as far as the employee is concerned. So this might have sounded a bit frightening, but it doesn't mean that you can't contact your employee outside business hours. So you can still contact them outside business hours, but it's going to be unlawful for you to take action because they didn't respond. So it's kind of, this is where the split fits. It's about the response. So under the new laws, it's going to be unlawful for you to take any action against them based on them not responding to your attempt to contact them. This applies from the 26th of August 2024 for businesses of 15 or more employees. And small businesses, 1 to 14 employees, you've got another year to get ready for it. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, that's wonderful. No, I was just saying that's good to have a bit more breathing room, isn't it? For small businesses, we've got enough on our plate.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's talk about your responsibilities as an employer. So the first thing, obviously, this is a law, so we can't get around being able to allow people to use their right to disconnect. So the law talks about not directly or indirectly preventing someone from exercising their right to disconnect. So what does that look like? Well, direct prevention might be an example of a written clause in a contract or something in a policy that documents to say you must be available whenever I need you, evenings, weekends, out of hours, and not doing anything like compensation or whatnot to support someone for doing that. Whereas indirect might be something more like around the culture. You might have a manager that sends emails, is quite a bother, doesn't overtly say, I need a response now, or I expect you to answer my call when I call you on Friday night, or whatever it may be. But what they're doing is playing favoritism or, giving promotions and opportunities to people that do sort of toe the line that's not being said, than those that don't. The other thing is that, obviously, as Susan said there, if an employee does exercise their right to disconnect and they don't answer your call or text or email, whatever it may be, it's advisable not to take action against them. So the obvious one is discriminating them or stopping them, like I said, as denying them those sorts of opportunities. The other thing is performance management. It might feel like something that you can say, well, I need that work done and I needed them and that they didn't answer my call and they never answer my call and start to think about performance managing them because they're not actually achieving the work that you need to do. But if it's, and this is where it starts to not be so black and white, but if you are contacting them after hours, is that appropriate to do? Are they compensated? Is it reasonable? All those sorts of questions. And I wouldn't be taking these sort of steps unless you're feeling like that was unreasonable for the employee to refuse that. So with that, with all this reasonable and unreasonable, what are we talking about? Let's unpack that a little bit more for you to make sense of it. So if we look at these 4 things, this is what's been recommended of us from the legislation to help determine, am I being unreasonable here or reasonable? The first thing is the reason for the contact. So as I said, is it reasonable that you need an urgent response to this, or is it just the fact that you're working at the moment and you want to send it? Having a think around that. The second thing is compensation. And the law doesn't just talk about paid compensation. So we're not simply talking about dollars here. It could be non-monetary, but it's about compensating them for either being available to work or actually doing work, if they're doing a particular project or writing a document or whatever it may be in that time. The third thing is looking at a person's role and level of responsibility. And we've got some scenarios as we go through here to compare, are they a manager? Is it their role to be, the person that is responsible for this matter? Or is it just something that they do to support another staff member? Those sorts of things there. And the fourth thing is a person's personal circumstances. So think about someone that has a young family. They might have children to care for. They might have an elderly parent or a disabled family member that they're caring for, and that's their responsibility. Those sorts of things are what we put together to help, have that picture of whether it's reasonable or unreasonable. Now, again, that's probably still giving you some questions of, yeah, but this, what about that? And hopefully the scenarios that we have today well, as we go through, we'll help give some answers to that. But as Susan said, if you've got questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So the first thing I'd suggest that you do is if you are planning to contact employee, or you're already doing it, contacting employees after hours, the first thing is to check, are you compensating them? So I've got listed here on the slide a couple of obvious ones. On-call allowance might be the one that you pay if a person is the one that is required to answer the call on X day, that sort of scenario. Overtime might apply if a person's working over their normal hours and they're asked to do that. Higher rates of pay. Let's say you've got a general manager and you want to put them on a salary and you offer a higher salary to compensate for the need for them to be available. And then the other things like additional paid leave, flexible working conditions, and upskilling, like the non-monetary items. So I've got a scenario here. Let's start putting that knowledge into practice. Let's look at Christina. Let's say she works in disability support services as a casual. She gets a message from her manager to offer her a shift for tomorrow. As someone else who regularly does that shift has had a car accident and is not going to be in. So what's your thoughts there? If you were her employer, would you think that that's unreasonable or reasonable? And I'll put a poll up on the screen for you. Oh, thank you, Susan. You're all over it. It's not to, put you in the column of whether you're right or wrong. It's just to help us unpack these into real scenarios and discuss what we think. Just share those results on screen if they're going to work. Looks like everybody's saying reasonable anyway, if you can't see that, which is wonderful. Yeah, so it's absolutely an example of reasonable, which is good. Next scenario I've got for you here is Xavier. Let's say he is a vet at Furry Friends Vet. I've got nice and creative there. He's one of 4 vets in the team. So he shares the duties of being on call after hours with the other vets in case of emergency. They do this by having a roster. So he's paid an on-call allowance for the 1 week of the month that he's on call. So again, do you think that's reasonable or unreasonable? Yeah, thank you for voting. Yes, look, we all agree there too that that's reasonable. And I would agree with you that, yeah, definitely, because he's got that roster and he's being paid an allowance, that is reasonable. Got 2 more scenarios here in this little portion for us. This is Justin. Let's imagine he works as an IT technician. Now, most of the jobs that he and his co-workers are doing or asked to do is to fix issues with existing computers or build new computers. And it's generally between office hours, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. However, when there's a new office location being set up, that needs to happen after hours so that it doesn't interrupt customer service and so on. So Justin is asked to work after his regular hours on occasion, but he's been caring for an elderly parent who's fallen ill recently. So would you say that is unreasonable or reasonable? An interesting one. Most of the votes coming through are reasonable, one saying unreasonable, and I would agree with that. It's an interesting one. Yes, it's reasonable in the fact that the work needs to be done in that time. That sounds okay. Presumably he's going to be paid for that time that he's working. It's going to be asked from him in advance. But the interesting and complicating factor there is he does have an elderly parent who's fallen ill. So that plays into the fact of he's got some other responsibilities that might stop him from being able to do that. And so the question is there anybody else in the team that can do that? And would it be fair to just place it on that one person? You'd have to sort of play that out in a real scenario. But that's the sort of questions that I would ask if that was you. The scenario I've got here is Anna. Just waiting for that to update that Anna has just started as a trainee receptionist position at a law firm, and she's very excited about her new job. Her manager needs a letter typed up, and because he was in a court all day, he doesn't email the instructions to Anna until late after she's already left. So he asks that she asks the type. He asks that she types the letter right away. Do you think that that's reasonable or unreasonable? Hmm. Very quick. Love it. Maybe I made that one a little too obvious, did I? Everyone's saying that's unreasonable, yeah. And that's playing upon the fact of understanding her role in the team, that she's a trainee. And is it really urgent, or is it more of a case of somebody that their day didn't go to plan or whatever might have happened, and can it wait till the morning? Yeah, so wonderful. Over to you, Susan.
Okay. So, employee responsibilities. Really, the main thing is for the employee to be contactable when you've agreed that they will be contactable. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but it's not always. But they're expected to respond to the contact if it was reasonable. So we've talked about what that looks like and when that can and can't happen. If it's considered unreasonable, then the employees can actually ask the Fair Work Commission to make an order that will stop the employer from continuing to require the employee to monitor, read, and respond to contact or attempted contact, or they can get an order to stop the employee from taking any disciplinary action against them. Or the Fair Work Commission can also step in and help resolve the dispute in another way. We've put the start dates up there in the corner just to remind you that it's not that urgent for small businesses, but it's important that you know these things. So if an employee feels that they've been adversely affected because they exercise their right to disconnect, so they might have been dismissed, that's obviously an adverse effect, or discipline, then they can apply to the Fair Work Ombudsman to deal with it as a dispute under the general protections rules, because they're protected from any actions like that when they're really just exercising their right, any sort of right, and in this case, the right to disconnect. If that ends up going to court, then there are penalties involved. And we've put the maximum penalties there in the slide for you, so it could get quite serious. So this is, one of the risks that are involved if you get an employee who feels they've been adversely affected because of exercising their right to disconnect. Oh, am I doing this one? Okay.
Go for it.
Sorry. So, a scenario. Laura's a general manager at a women's shelter, and it's the organisation's policy that should a child protection matter come up, then Laura is going to be informed to report, as is always necessary, as soon as possible. Because it can't be anticipated when something like that might come up, there's an understanding between Laura and her employer that she will take this call whenever it should occur due to it being such an urgent issue. So what do you think? If she's contacted out of her normal working hours, would that be reasonable or unreasonable? Yes, of course. It looks like everyone's on board with the same answer for that one as well. That would be reasonable. And what makes that reasonable is that there's that prior agreement that that's part of her role. Over to you, Angela.
Wonderful. Thanks, Susan. I pressed a little bit too quickly there. Okay, so we've given you the employees and the employer's side of things and what you're required to do, but it's clear that this is nuanced. So let's start to dig a little deeper into how we implement this and the challenges we may have and what solutions we can offer you. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is consider Is it appropriate to expect that employees monitor and respond to their communications? So I talked about it earlier. Is it a case of somebody just sending it because they're working at that time? Is it really urgent? Those sorts of things. You'll know best about your workload and how you work with your clients and whatnot, and whether that is just part of the job or whether it is something of, another reason for that. Think about how you'll challenge if an employee is declining a reasonable communication. So, as Susan offered there, if it's reasonable that you're asking for this and the employee still refuses, that's not okay. So, how would you deal with that? What would you do in that scenario? On the flip side, how would you respond if an employee has the concern? So, if you've got a manager that isn't actually working ethically and they're still bothering people after hours despite your advice to, respect the right to disconnect, and a particular employee says they just keep bothering me after hours and I have a concern with that, what would you do with that information? What communication methods are you using? So, as I talked about in the beginning, all those different notifications from different apps, I think Susan presented a few too, thinking about what is it? What will it look like for them? Will they get a notification on their phone or is it an email? If they have that computer switched off, it won't matter. Think that through what it would look like. I guess the big question is how often does this occur? How much of a risk is it for your business? Is it a case that this is all the time, every day, once a week, or is it just every now and then? And what arrangements do you have for compensation in place? As well, as I talked about before, global teams as well, we haven't raised that until now, but the idea of having teams interstate or even overseas, other than where we are, can create obviously that time difference and can create an even more further reaching disconnect between when people are working. And so if that's the case as well and they need to communicate, how does that sort of work if it needs to happen that way? From there, what I would encourage you to do is start by reviewing your policies. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, and disagree with me if you want, Susan, but I wouldn't recommend writing a right to disconnect policy. What I would do is simply look at if you've got a policy, something around conduct or, something to that effect, computer use or whatnot. Have a look at those and just see what they're asking for. You might have a clause in your employment contract, certainly like that example we said earlier of a manager that might need to be available constantly. Do you have a clause in your contract that says they do that? And is that still reasonable or not reasonable? Ask yourself those questions of what might need to be edited. And all those things there, as we talked about, like what are the expectations? What would be the circumstances of reasonable or unreasonable and the process for raising concerns? Establishing boundaries with those third parties, that might be the newest piece to the puzzle, really. Most of the rest of it up till now might be common sense. But I think it's important to include them in the discussion. Let them know that this is something that you will be respecting for your staff. And what does that mean for them? Does that mean they can't call your staff member after 6 p.m. or whatever it is? Is it that they no longer can expect an email returned within 24 hours or 4 hours or something like that? What does that look like for them? And make sure that they're aware so that that then doesn't play into complicating the issue for you. As I said, reviewing your employment contracts and expectations. We're big on that one, aren't we, Susan?
Yeah.
Talking about expectations with your staff, setting that in stone, talking with them about that before the need occurs. So now is a perfect time to let them know, I've done some training on this right to disconnect, and this is what it means for us, and we've put this in place, or we've considered this. And if this happens, we would expect you to answer, but otherwise, no, or whatever it may be, again, for your specific scenario. The other thing is to educate your managers. So just like including your subcontractors and any third parties in the discussion, include your managers in that as well, or your team leaders, anyone that's managing staff. Include them in this information. Let them know what your decisions are around how the organisation will operate and what's expected of staff. Encourage managers, and dare I say it, even yourselves as business owners, to obviously respect a person's right to disconnect, but even going one step further and modeling it yourself. If it's something that you can do, it's something that your staff will notice and, will feel much more comfortable, even without anything being said often, to just slip into the same thing that you're doing. Encourage all employees because it does involve co-workers as well. So think about making sure everybody is aware. You don't want a co-worker even contacting someone unnecessarily after hours. And you could think, if you want to go one step further, you could think about organising some training that highlights the mental health benefits of disconnecting from work as well. So my ideas here for you, because there are a lot of them if we start to dig into what we have available, think about using an out of office or an auto reply function on emails. That can really then help to, number one, set a boundary, but help a person to at least get a response to go, oh, okay, I can't expect a reply from her until Tuesday when she's back, or whatever it may be. There's a schedule send or delay send on emails and messages often. I found it myself even on Microsoft Teams, if you use Teams, with messages that way. So lots of those functions now can allow a person that whenever they're working, whatever the time may be, they can prep it while it's fresh in their mind, but it won't actually bother or notify the other person until they're back, for example, say. Do not disturb time. So my thought there was around mobile devices. They have the function to set or even pre-schedule different times of day when notifications won't come up. They'll remain silent, until the next day or whatnot. So utilizing those functions can help to, again, to set those boundaries if that applies. Similarly, turning off or muting notifications works in the same way, or turning your phone on silent. Um, Including a comment in email signatures. You've probably seen that before, no doubt. It's not a new idea, but that can be a really helpful thing if you're not already using that, if you've got people that have those different hours or different days they're working. You might consider separating what sort of devices people are using. So not doubling up and just using their personal phone. They might have a work phone and a personal, or whatever the case may be, or laptop for work and a laptop for personal, that sort of thing, to just again help set those boundaries. You could use calendar blocking if that's going to be helpful for your team, so people know if bookings are a thing, and it's helpful to just re-establish those boundaries through the calendar itself, having the uncontactable times in there. Yeah, and putting work-related apps onto a personal device. So my thought there was around a personal mobile or a iPad or laptop or whatever, not having those on a personal device, because if a person goes on and does some internet shopping of an evening on their own personal device, something might pop up if it's work-related, if those notifications are on there as well. So I've got another scenario for you here. This is Andrea. She's a senior accountant at a local firm, and it's her responsibility to lodge reports for clients on time to avoid fines. Andrea lodged a report for a client on the due date and left work for that evening. So imagine here that after hours, her boss receives a notification that the lodgement failed and it needs to be in the system before midnight, or the client will be penalised. Do you think that that is reasonable or unreasonable?
I'm sorry there was delay in making that live.
It's okay. Bit of a mixed bag there too. Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the fact that she is required, like she's the one that's required to lodge that, is an interesting piece of the puzzle. But also, it is after hours. Can it wait? What impact does it really have on the employees, on the client? Sorry, is there, other ways that can get around that? So I absolutely understand why that would be a bit of both with that one as well. So you'll start to see here as we go through these scenarios, there's no, black and white here. We really just need to play out these into what this affects for real world here. Yeah, so my next scenario for you is Miriam. Let's say that she is a regional manager working in the insurance industry, Her employer is the victim of a cyber breach, and it's Miriam's responsibility to handle this matter and notify customers and all that sort of thing that goes with that. Now, due to the urgent nature of that, Miriam is asked to work 9 hours a day instead of her regular 7.5 until the matter is dealt with, and she's going to be paid accordingly. So do you think that that's fair, reasonable, or unreasonable for Miriam? Sorry, I was just getting on the wrong screen there. Yes, you all agree, reasonable. Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Because
Can
of
I
the, please, yeah.
go on? Oh, well, Angela was going to say because it's been agreed that she'll be paid for extra time, but in many of these scenarios, we don't always have the full story. So we remember one of them talked about carer responsibilities as well. So, there's always going to be those grey areas that you need to know more details in order to describe for your situation whether that's reasonable or unreasonable.
Good
That's all I
point.
wanted to say, Angela.
No, it's a very good point. Yeah, so we've used these scenarios to help you start to think about what it might look like in real life. I hope that they're helpful. But yeah, we'd love to be able to say to you, it's this if it's reasonable, and it's that if it's unreasonable. But yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Not always black and white, is it?
No. This is Max here. Let's assume that he's working as a welder. It's on a Friday and he has a question about his pay from last week's payroll. And he decides to contact his co-worker Debbie to query that. Let's presume Debbie works in the payroll. He apologizes to her saying, look, I know you don't work Fridays, Debbie, but I really need you to answer this for me because I'm going off on holiday next week. Do you think that that's reasonable or unreasonable?
This should be interesting. I've experienced that situation.
I think it's fair to say most of us would have.
Mm.
I don't mean to bother you, but
Yeah, that's right.
does look like most of you saying unreasonable there. And I actually would agree with you. I don't know if you agree, Susan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say it's unreasonable. Look, it depends on your particular scenario because, I mean, if it's something around pay and he was underpaid, let's say it wasn't something that was a bit of a nuisance question, then yeah, it might be urgent to fix that. But is Debbie the only person that can help, or could it be somebody else? So, yeah, interesting thoughts there. I've got one more for scenario for him, or two more. This is Margaret. She works in a retail store. And the store is closed from 5 p.m. each day. And this is also, of course, when she finishes her workday and goes home. A customer attempts to enter the store as Margaret is putting the close sign on the door and locking the premises. And they want to make a last minute purchase. Come on, Margaret, please let me through. I just need to buy bread and milk or whatever it may be. Do we think that that is reasonable or unreasonable? Mm. Everyone's saying unreasonable to that one too. Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? I would absolutely agree that it's unreasonable. Um, I'm sure if I was Margaret, I'd be like, oh, I just want to go home.
But
Out
if
of my
you were the
way.
customer, you might want your milk.
You may. And this is where it comes down to how your actual business operates. If you were a retail store and you had said to Margaret, look, if someone does do that and you have the time, please make sure you've got time for them and just let them know about, whatever you could do to help manage or mitigate that situation for her. Because maybe it's really critical that, a customer's not missed. But, as it reads, yeah, she does have the right to go home and say no to the customer. So up to a manager there, but it does sound unreasonable. One last scenario for us at this point, and this is Sam. He works at a call centre casually. His manager calls him to offer a shift, but Sam can't answer as he's waiting in a doctor's surgery for an appointment at that time. Sam's manager happens to call him 11 times in 15 minutes. Unfortunately, this is a real scenario. I got it from somebody that asked me this question. Reasonable or unreasonable? It didn't take you all long, yes.
Okay.
Unreasonable.
Voting was very quick on that one, not much thinking required.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because, I mean, we're offering them a shift, that's fair enough. But I think where it becomes unreasonable is the amount of times a person's been contacted that frequently.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So, as I said, I think the important thing is to talk with your employees and, of course, your third parties as well. Let them know about those changes. Let them know that you're aware of it and what decisions you've made that are appropriate for you and your team, and how you're going to implement it in your work. And so, it's important to have those discussions so that everybody's on the same page. At this point, we'd like to just save some time for answering any questions that you might have that's, through the content today. Was there anything that was prompted to you that you think, oh, I don't know how that would work in my business or in my team? Any question at all, we don't mind. You can ask us anything. I think we're up for that, aren't we, Susan?
Oh, well, we're game. Maybe we could start with Stephen's question about working in real estate.
Oh, so
So we're
Stephen
in
said here
commercial. Yeah.
Sorry, Susan. So he's saying we're in
Oh,
commercial real estate, so interested to hear about how these new laws affect our business. Yeah.
would you like to answer that one, Angela?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just reading another one that came in. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Oh, well, I'll answer the real estate one.
Go for it. Go for it.
Well, hopefully Steve's got a few more ideas from what we've been saying about reasonable and unreasonable, but your award and all modern awards are being changed from the 26th of August. The Fair Work Commission's been working on that. So there are some industry exceptions in terms of who can be contacted when. So it's worth checking your award or asking us and we'll find out for you. Okay.
There's the question that I was reading, Susan, was does a standby or overtime allowance need to be properly specified, or can it be just grossed up in their salary package? My answer to you there is if it's included in their salary package by means of they are not worse off. So it would need to be a salary package that is better off, so higher than the award rate plus the allowance. So they wouldn't be missing out on anything. Then, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I think we might have said it, or there was a scenario there with like a general manager who is expected to just be on call, once a month or every day, whatever it may be. If that's the sort of scenario there and you want to not have to always just pay a allowance here, there, and everywhere and work it out, you could, yes, just work out a salary package that is high enough so that they're not worse off. And yeah, that would be fine. Another question, Susan, is how these laws work when there are workers under a specific award. So I think that touches on what you just said there around the awards changing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Miguel. Are you saying these changes need to be included when negotiating enterprise bargaining agreements or individual contracts? Yes, would be my answer to you, Miguel. Yeah. So as Susan said, the modern awards are updating. They haven't done them just yet. I think Fair Work are actually going to even put out a publication around how this should be implemented. So a guideline sort of document. So keep an eye out for that as it comes out. But yes, if you are in the process of negotiating an EBA or just an individual employment contract, yeah, these should definitely be respected and be part of that. I hope that answers your question. Cool. Well, we're happy to answer any other questions if they do come in. Please don't be shy to drop that in there. Otherwise, we can press ahead. Seeing anything come. Oh, one more. No, there we are. How are these changes applied to those working as sole traders? Interesting. I'm going to assume that you mean sole traders that have employees, if I've got that right. So, I mean, irrespective of what type of business we're talking about, this legislation applies to all employees in Australia, or it will from 26 August. So if I make some assumptions, a sole trader can have employees. It's just a different form of structure in terms of an entity. But those employees would absolutely still have the right to disconnect. The only difference there is that I'm going to assume they might be a small business and have less than 15 staff, and so that doesn't apply till 2025 for them. But any other comments there, Susan?
Yes, I've just seen that Miguel's added to that in terms of talking about people who work in the disability sector, so support workers who are hired through platforms like HireUp and Mabel.
Ah.
So they'd be operating as sole traders, I'm assuming, but they would be contacted from the platform that's where people are trying to contact them. So Miguel, I would think that you would have to look at what the contract says for working for those organisations. And what their expectations are. A lot about what we talk about is all about everyone being on the same page and knowing what the expectations are before they start. And I can't really give a guidance on how that covers your right to disconnect, but hopefully someone like HireUp would be addressing that, even though you're not employees. You are, I guess, they'd be considered a third party. Or, yeah. I don't know, Angela, any more ideas?
Yeah, my thought was, are they a subcontractor? So is the relationship between the disability, agency that you'd actually go and work at and the person being contacted on HireUp or Mabel, is that a subcontractor relationship? Or is it labour hire?
Yeah,
because if
don't know that. Don't know the answer to that for sure.
no, but if it's subcontractor, I would dare say, yeah, I agree with you, Susan. It's a little bit like you'd hope that someone like HireUp or Mabel would start to respect these here, but what we are talking about is the right of the employee here today. So, yeah, if they're, I don't think that's the
Rather
case
than
with Mabel and
contractors,
so on.
yeah.
Mm.
There's another query here.
Mm?
Did you want me to read that one?
Go for it.
Due to the nature of our non-profit organisation, everyone in our team, except me, only works a maximum of 3 hours per day. So the minimum might be 2 hours once a week. Does this mean they're able to wait until their shift, potentially 4 days after initial correspondence, to reply to non-urgent queries? I would say the short answer is yes, because you're not paying them for the hours that they're not at work.
Yeah. I'd agree with you, Susan. The only thing I'd add for you, Emma, there is to think about how urgent is the contact? Is it something that does require a response really quickly? And so how would you navigate that? Can you help an employee understand those expectations and understand what the difference is between something of urgent nature and something that can wait until they're next in? That's what I'd add there. But otherwise, yeah, it does sound like they'd have the right there to wait until they're back in to respond to that.
And again, it comes back to what you have in their employment contract, whether they will be contactable and what arrangements you have to pay them for the time when they're not normally at work. Miguel's it's gone.
Sorry, may I add just one more thing for you, Emma?
Yeah.
The other thing to think about is how much of I'm trying to think of a better word than this, but a nuisance is it to the person that's getting the contact? So if it's something that's non-urgent that you just want to inform them of, it might be something where you set up the expectation and say, look, I'd love to give you an update of what's happened since you've last been in. I will send you a 3-minute video. If you could please watch that the night before your next shift, or something like that. If it was something that they're not required to respond to, you just want to inform them, because I see there you're saying it's non-urgent. something like that might apply, where you could give them something that's not going to interrupt their personal life too much, but can make sure the work's flowing. So, an idea.
Yeah, but again, I would make sure that everyone knows that that's the expectation, and
You're
that
right.
people have agreed to that. Yeah. Miguel, thank you for coming back with that. So they're working as subcontractors when we're talking about the disability support workers. And so it looks like it probably depends on what platform they're working with. So
Mm.
it'll be a case of checking what they're offering.
Mm. Yeah, you're saying there's some are planning to provide employee benefits. So that's great if they're doing that. So they should. I think it's wonderful to be on board with what others are getting as well. So wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Look, we are still here to answer questions, but we'll press on with the last few slides that we do have, and keep an eye. We'll keep an eye on that Q&A if anything else should come through.
Sure.
Susan,
Oh, this is me.
this is you.
Okay. So in summary then, employees are going to have the right to refuse contact or attempt to contact outside of their working hours unless that refusal is unreasonable. So, you know, this whole reasonable, unreasonable thing is where it all hinges. You can still contact your employee outside business hours, but it's unlawful for you to take action or discriminate against them if they don't respond to you. And that includes third parties. And as we discussed, that applies from the 26th of August. So you've got 6 days. If you've got 15 or more employees, or you've got a year and 6 days, if you're a small business, to prepare for this. And those larger employees who are subject to awards, probably worth checking the award to see if your industry's been excluded on certain aspects. It's expected that you would compensate employees who are asked to be available outside of their normal working hours. And in any sort of situation where there's you're going to do that, you need to consider the reason that you're contacting them, the nature of the employee's role, and their personal circumstances. And that will all come into any measure of whether the contact was reasonable or unreasonable. And as we've suggested, you probably need to take a look at some of your policies or employment contracts, other agreements that you might have in place before that date. So we would say from Aster HR that there's definitely bottom line benefits and work health and safety benefits to you for having refresh and recharge employees. If your employees have got the time to disconnect from work, then you've got less opportunity of them having burnout, and I would say also injuries in certain roles. And you'll also help your compliance with the new psychosocial hazard requirements.
Very true. Yes. Well, if you're still with us, thank you for hanging around. We have reached the end here. We would just love to help by telling you a little bit more about us at Aster HR and how we could help you. If you'd like to continue the conversation today or find yourself in need of any HR advice in any other matter, this slide that you see in front of you here, we predominantly play in one of these 4 areas, the team at Aster. So we obviously advise in terms of anything under the HR banner. So we can come in and help you with whatever burning question you have or issue that you have, and either walk through that with you or give you some advice to set you on the right track forward. We also support clients in recruitment, helping that process really efficient and helping them find the right people for their team. Susan, as she said at the beginning, is one of our coaches. She does a wonderful job in executive and leadership coaching as well, one-on-one with people. And we also offer workshops and events much like you're seeing today. If you are wanting to know a little bit more about the Closing Loopholes Bill, we did talk about that at the beginning, where there's lots to that. There's actually lots of different legislation we've had recently. We have a product called a HR Health Check. If you wanted to do that, you're welcome to scan that code there. It will invite you to book that in right away with either Susan or myself. We will spend an hour of time with you online or on the phone, whatever you prefer. Or if you're close to us, we'll come to you, and we'll spend some time to go through all of the compliance areas in your business, not just to understand that you are meeting compliance areas and what risk is there for you, but also thinking a little bit further into the engagement piece and how to keep and retain staff and all those other areas as well that will help you have a high performing team. So if you'd like to do that, please reach out to us. We'd love to help you. But as Susan said, we do have our podcast Work Wonders. We are about to launch our 6th season. Have I got that right, Susan?
Yes, I believe so.
If you are a podcast listener, please jump on and have a listen and let us know what you think. We love to hear from our listeners and prep the content they're looking for. So that's us. I think anything else you want to add, Susan?
No, except thank you for listening and thanks for those questions. They were great.
Wonderful. We hope this content was helpful for you today. It is a bit of a tricky one, this piece of legislation. In a lot of ways, it's practical and common sense, but as you dig deeper, it's a bit of a trickier one, a bit more complex to start to think about. So hopefully what we've presented today helps you, but please keep in touch if you'd like to know more.